In February 1959, 9 experienced hikers set off into the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. Their destination was a peak called Oterten. Their route would take them across a slope the local Mansi people had a chilling name for, Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a skilled engineering student. All 9 were experienced outdoorsmen and women, used to harsh winter conditions. This wasn't their first serious expedition. On January 27th, they began their final approach. One member turned back early due to illness, the only member of the group who would survive. The remaining 8 pressed on with Dyatlov. On February 1st, the weather turned. Heavy snow and worsening visibility forced the group to make a decision that would later be scrutinized for decades. They set up camp on the open slope of Kholat Syakhl itself, rather than descending to the safety of the tree line just over a mile away. No one knows for certain why. Some researchers believe they wanted to avoid losing the elevation they'd gained. Others believe they simply misjudged how exposed the location was. Whatever the reason, that decision would matter. The group was expected to send a telegram to their sports club once they returned. When February 12th came and went with no word, no one panicked. Immediately delays were common. But as days passed with continued silence, search parties were organized. Volunteers, students, and eventually the military began combing the mountain. On February 26th, searchers found the tent. It was still standing, half collapsed under snow. But something was deeply... The tent had been cut open from the inside, not the entrance. The side of the fabric itself sliced through, as if the people inside needed to escape faster than the entrance would allow. Footprints led away from the tent. Bare feet, or feet in only socks, pressed into the snow, in temperatures that would have been roughly -25 to -30 degrees Celsius. Whatever happened, the hikers had run from their own tent in the middle of a Ural winter night without proper footwear or coats. They ran toward the tree line, over half a mile away. Under a large cedar tree at the edge of the forest, searchers found the first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko. Both were shoeless, in torn, thin clothing. The remains of a small fire were nearby. The cedar's branches had been broken well above head height, as if someone had climbed it, possibly to look back toward the camp or toward whatever had driven them out of it. Further up the slope, between the tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were found. Dyatlov himself, along with Zenaida Kolmogorova and Rustem Slobodin. Their position suggested they had been trying to make their way back to the tent when they died. All 5 bodies found so far showed no major external trauma. The official cause of death for this group, hypothermia. But hypothermia alone didn't explain everything investigators were seeing. Some of the victims had partially removed their own clothing, a real and documented phenomenon in the final stages of freezing to death, when the body's temperature regulation system fails and the person feels a burning sensation as though overheating. It was tragic, but at this point, still explainable. It took over 2 months for the snow to melt enough to reveal the final 4 bodies. In May, searchers found them in a ravine under several meters of snow, roughly 75 meters further into the forest. And this is where the story stops being a tragic story about hikers caught in a storm and becomes one of the most debated mysteries in modern history. 2 of the 4, Nikolai Thibault Brignol and Lyudmila Dubinina, had suffered severe internal injuries, fractured ribs, major internal bleeding, the kind of trauma normally associated with a serious car crash or a heavy fall from height. But there were no external wounds to match, no cuts, no bruising patterns consistent with a beating or an attack. The lead forensic examiner stated plainly that the force involved was far beyond what a human being could have caused, and that no soft tissue damage was present to suggest a physical assault. Dubinina was also missing her tongue, eyes, part of her lips, and some facial tissue. For decades, this detail alone fueled some of the wildest theories about the case, but forensic experts have since attributed it to natural decomposition and predation by wildlife. Over the 2+ months the body sat exposed before discovery, not to any violent act. At the time of death, several of the victims' clothing items were also found to carry elevated levels of radioactivity, far above what would be expected from an ordinary hiking trip. A separate group of hikers, camped about 50 kilometers south of Dyatlov's group that same night, independently reported seeing strange orange spheres of light moving across the sky to the north. They weren't the only ones. Several witnesses in the wider region gave similar accounts around the same time. Lights that seemed to move and change direction in ways that didn't match anything conventional they could think of. No one has ever definitively explained what these witnesses saw. In the decades since, Dozens of explanations have been proposed, some more credible than others. Military cover-up theories point to the region's proximity to secret Soviet weapons testing and to the fact that the original investigators were reportedly ordered to keep certain details out of the record. The Soviet government never released a satisfying explanation at the time, which only fed public suspicion. Infrasound theories suggest that specific wind patterns moving across the mountain's terrain could have generated low-frequency sound waves, inaudible to the human ear, but scientifically documented to cause intense feelings of panic, nausea, and dread in people exposed to them. Under this theory, the hikers may have been driven into a genuine physiological panic response, strong enough to make them slash their way out of a tent in the middle of the night. Avalanche theories were dismissed for decades because the slope wasn't steep enough for a conventional avalanche, and rescuers found no obvious avalanche debris. But in 2021, a team of Swiss and Russian engineers published a detailed physics model showing how a rare, small slab avalanche could still occur on a gentler slope, especially with the hikers having cut into the snow to pitch their tent, which combined with wind-blown snow accumulation above them, could release a slab of packed snow directly onto the tent. Their model showed this could plausibly cause the kind of internal injuries seen on some of the victims, without leaving obvious avalanche debris behind. This slab avalanche theory is currently the most scientifically supported explanation, and Russia's own prosecutor general's office officially closed the case in 2020, citing a combination of avalanche and poor visibility. But even the scientists behind the theory have been careful to say it doesn't explain everything, not the radiation, not the orange spheres, not every detail of how the group behaved after leaving the tent. Other researchers remain unconvinced entirely, pointing out that the slope's incline still doesn't perfectly match typical avalanche conditions, and that key questions remain unanswered. More than 60 years later, the Dyatlov Pass Incident remains one of the rare cases where science, government investigation, and decades of independent research still haven't fully agreed on what happened. What we do know, 9 experienced, capable hikers made a series of small decisions on an ordinary expedition, and within one night, something happened that was severe enough to make them tear their way out of their own shelter and run half-dressed into a lethal winter night, never to return. Maybe it really was a freak, almost impossible slab of snow. Maybe it was something science hasn't fully mapped yet. Maybe we'll never know for certain, but Kholat Syakhl still carries its old name for a reason.